to the University of Missouri Extension Winter Production Conference, Night 3, with Karen and Doug Scott, Oakwoods Farm. This event is sponsored by the grant from Missouri Department of Agriculture through Webb City Farmers Market and University of Missouri and Lincoln University partnerships. We appreciate you being here. As we proceed into the evening, we have quite a show for you, actually, a lot of video. We'll be talking about the good things that are happening at Oakwoods Farm this time of year, and some of the things they do throughout the year, such as their organic practices that they do. They're not certified organic, but they do organic practices. And we'll see how they build soil health and those types of things as well. So as we move along, I'd like to introduce you to some of our team. We have Patrick Byers with us from University of Missouri Extension, and Kelly McGowan from University of Missouri Extension. We have David Middleton from Lincoln University and Sean Bishop from Lincoln University. And also with us today is our sponsor, Eileen Nichols from Webb City Farmers Market. And we're glad that they're here today. Karen and Doug Scott are the farmers we're talking to.
I'm Patrick Byers, Horticulture Field Specialist with University of Missouri Extension.
And I'm Robert Balick, Horticulture Field Specialist with University of Missouri Extension.
Robert, it is a cold winter day. The wind's blowing, the snow is swirling around us, but that doesn't mean that we can't be enjoying fresh, locally grown produce.
That's right, Patrick. In this video, we will learn from the expertise of Karen and Doug Scott from Oakwood Farms on winter crop production.
I'm Patrick Byers, Horticulture Field Specialist with University of Missouri Extension, and I'm joining my colleague Robert Balick, also a Horticulture Field Specialist of University of Missouri Extension, in putting together this part of the 2021 Winter Production Conference. This conference is designed to help encourage farmers to consider growing and marketing fruits and vegetables during the winter season. Now, for our conference this year, we're virtual. And one of the highlights of the conference is the focus on several farms here in Southwest Missouri that have been leaders in developing winter production and marketing. And I'm so excited to be joined here today by Karen and Doug Scott of Oakwoods Farm. Karen and Doug, would you mind to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the farm?
Well, I'm Karen.
I'm Doug.
Our farm is 62 acres. We have 1 acre under vegetable production. We practice no-till, organic, with a focus on soil building. We farm 4 seasons, and we've been doing this full-time for 7 years now. We also raise Boer goats and beef cattle on a rotational grazing system on an additional 50 acres.
Very good, thank you. Tell us a little bit about how you market the products from Oakwoods Farm.
We sell at 2 farmers markets, year-round farmers markets. We also sell our products online and at a natural food store in Carthage.
Very good. Well, of course, the focus of our time together today and in the coming weeks is on winter production. And as I mentioned at the beginning, Oakwoods Farm has embraced winter production and marketing crops during the winter. Could you tell us a bit about how that process developed and the crops that you're growing that are targeting winter production?
I think it was 6 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, we attended a workshop in Lamar in the winter on winter farming. And we learned about the EQIP program. And ever since then, we've been hooked on winter farming. We prefer farming in the winter more than in the summertime. We find that the weed pressure, the bug pressure is less, and that there really is an opportunity to make decent earnings in the wintertime.
So you've touched on some of the reasons that the farmers might consider winter production. In your experience, is there good potential for farmers to expand into that time of year? I mean, do we have unmet demand, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes, I believe we have unmet demand. We have, oh gosh, Yang, Breaker, us. We really only have 3 strong winter farmers in this part of the state, and that's the Joplin area. So And our farmers markets are open year round, so there is opportunity to provide more good fresh greens and vegetables to the consumer.
We seem to sell everything we grow. So if we could grow more, when we grow more, we sell more. So there is a potential for growth. I'm sure if somebody else was growing, they could tap into a market also.
Are there challenges associated with growing for marketing during the winter?
For marketing during the winter, there's less foot traffic, of course, through the farmers markets. I want to say demand is down from compared to high season in the summertime. Although we try to mitigate that, we have really good managers at both of our farmers markets who do an excellent job of marketing to the public and letting them know that we're there. And of course we have social media, and again we sell online and try to keep interest sparked through that.
So that's the marketing side, but what about the production side? Are there challenges associated with producing for winter markets?
There is. Like we were just talking earlier, we won't be growing romaine lettuce in the wintertime. It's just too cold, where other leaf lettuce does a good job and is very tasty in the winter. The veins in the romaine freeze and then it's unsellable. So that's we've tried to grow it for the last 3 years and it's like, well, that didn't work again. So
Yeah.
we're not going to do it next time.
There's a lesson to be learned here.
Right. But other than that, there's certain things that grow good in the winter, and you can't grow tomatoes, but lettuce, greens, turnips, radishes, kale grow great. We have a 8 lettuce mix that is our kind of our bread and butter for the winter. And then we also do a lettuce mix with a greens mix in it. So then we have 8 different kinds of lettuce, and then we'll have 5 different kinds of greens mixed together. And that's a highly profitable,
Very
sought
popular.
after
So greens are sort of the backbone of your winter production.
winter production. Yeah.
Of course, winter marketing is focused certainly on things that are in the ground at that point, but also things that you've harvested and stored, like this gorgeous garlic here. So in addition to the greens and the garlic, what are some of the other crops that you market during the winter?
Carrots, potatoes. We didn't grow sweet potatoes this year, but that is a staple. Also winter squash.
And we do a lot of dehydrating in the summertime.
So value added.
So value added is part of your marketing strategy for the winter.
We do a lot of chili mixes,
Salts,
salts,
seasonings
pepper salts.
from items that we've grown.
So everything is basically that we use on the farm. Our onions, our garlic, our peppers, our tomatoes. We do a lot of value added in the summer too. We don't really waste anything. If we have old tomatoes, we do salsas and sauces and things, and the chickens get a lot of good veggies too.
So some considerations though are washing lettuce when it's 30 degrees. Making sure that you have facilities where it's at least comfortable to do so. Harvesting in cold weather, is another consideration. Can't harvest lettuce when it's frozen. There are row covers that we're constantly pulling over the tops of crops to protect them, even in the high tunnels. And then venting the high tunnels, that's almost a daily thing that needs to be done, daily job that needs to be done. Bug pressure, I think aphids are really if not letting them get out of control. And we've done a pretty good job, I think, of establishing methods to keep them under control.
Very good. Well, of course, we're talking now in September, and over the next few months, we'll be coming back and taking a look at what's happening here on Oakwoods Farm. I want to thank you for opening the farm to us and for kicking off this video. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
A high tunnel is a useful tool when it comes to winter production, but typically farmers are using high tunnels year-round. It's September, and we're in one of the high tunnels at Oakwoods Farm. This tunnel is in transition. We can still see the tomato crop out here that has been so productive through the warm part of the growing season, but we're nearing the end of the profitable life of these tomatoes, and we're transitioning this tunnel into crops that are going to be grown for fall, winter, and early spring production.
So we have tomatoes in here now. They will be coming out in the next week, and we have young seedlings of lettuces, chard, and more kale that's going to be transplanted in. We just put in a bed of spinach. The soil is at the optimum temperature right now for that. We've got kale here that's been producing very, very well, and it will continue producing through most of the winter, but we'll have another succession of kale that we'll be harvesting behind that.
Integrated pest management in a high tunnel in the fall, winter, and early spring is really very similar to integrated pest management at any other time. A farmer who's practicing integrated pest management is looking at all of the options that are available to help manage problems. And some of these management tactics are naturally occurring, and we have a perfect example here in the high tunnel.
We have a very hard-working garden spider here. You can see her zipper web, and then she's got 3 egg sacs back here. She has really been very responsible for keeping the moth population down in here, which has really helped our brassicas. We haven't well, since she's moved in, we haven't noticed a lot of worms at all. So that is another reason that we practice organic methods, is to make sure that we're protecting our beneficial insects.
A critical aspect for success in fall, winter, and spring production is timing. It's all about timing. And successful farmers who are growing for the winter markets are pros at knowing when to plant plants. And this tunnel is an excellent example, and we can see several different successions of different types of plants, but again, all being planted at the right time with the idea of targeting specific markets.
So in this house, this is an example of some direct seeded greens that we have over here. Those were direct seeded last week, and we will do multiple successions of that. Then we have lettuces here. There are multiple successions of lettuces. These are all transplanted, and we transplant our lettuces when they're 4 weeks old. There is a most winter farmers know, all winter farmers know, that there's a fall factor that we have to take into consideration. So these lettuces would typically mature in about 56 days in the summertime. These lettuces here are going to take 70 days, and then anything we plant after this, it will be up to 120 days to maturity. The closer we get to that period of less than 10 hours a day of sunlight.
Persephone.
Persephone. We've also, we have some cilantro that's planted over here that is well grown, and we'll be able to take that through the fall as well. And again, that's another crop that we succession all winter long. But we want to make sure that these crops get some good growth on them as we go into November. And then they will hold, we'll be harvesting from these well through December and January.
Well, it's getting towards the end of October, and we're back out visiting Oakwoods Farm. And we have with us today Karen and Doug Scott. Would you all like to just share with us what's going on at the farm today?
Yeah, it's late October. We've had 2 frosts now, so the crops in the field are mostly done, except for the really hardy items, and we're still cleaning out the tomatoes in the high tunnels, and transplanting, seeding, and we're still harvesting as well.
An important part of success with winter production is being able to schedule planting and seeding so that we're able to grow crops to size, hold them so that they can be marketed during the late fall, winter, and spring. And here at Oakwoods, Karen and Doug have worked out a system. So if you don't mind, share with me how you schedule plantings.
It has taken a lot of record keeping to determine exactly how to do this. But going into the fall, we have maps of our beds that are open and how many plants can go in there. We have determined that as the days get longer, the days to maturity of our, let's say our lettuce crop in particular, get farther and farther, or get greater and greater. So, for instance, the lettuce that we will be transplanting into the high tunnel in the coming weeks, they went from roughly 56 days to maturity to now we're going to be at 107 days to maturity. So we need to determine how, based on our sales, how much lettuce do we need to have available to cover sales during that time period. And so we've come up with what those quantities are, and you'll see that this last seeding that we did, it's 1,600 lettuce heads, and that's not typically what we do. We typically do about 500 every week, but now we're going to do 1,600, and it's going to be more like every 4 weeks. And that last planting we'll start harvesting it 12/28, and then it should be we should be finished with it on February the 11th. So then we need to figure out what our next seeding quantity needs to be to cover that next time period, and corresponding to the bed space that we have available.
So it's a little bit like putting a jigsaw puzzle together,
It
making
is
sure all the
exactly
pieces
like-
fit.
Exactly like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. And just knowing, which beds do we have coming open, and making sure that we've got a crop to go in there, and we're turning those beds right away. In this high tunnel, we have spinach planting that was transplanted using a Jang seeder, so it's pretty densely planted, and it went in on September 3rd when the soil temperatures weren't quite so hot.
23rd, I think.
The 23rd of September. And so we got some really good germination, and then we came back in a couple of weeks later, and on October 7th we did another succession of that, and you can see that that's still germinating. And that's so to make sure that we're going to have a good we're going to be able to harvest the lettuce all season long.
Spinach.
The spinach all season long until it bolts in probably April. So here we have our spinach, and we planted this spinach on 9/23 when the soil temperatures dropped to below, I think they were below 80 degrees, and so we got some really good germination on that. And then we came back in with another succession on October the 7th, and you can see that that's just really starting to germinate really well. This ensures that we're going to have spinach throughout the entire winter season. It will probably start bolting. When do you think it'll start bolting?
Oh, end of April.
End of April. And then we'll have more successions planted outdoors. But that's going to carry us through the season.
And the kale will carry us pretty much through, but we have another succession in another high tunnel also, just planted this week.
Yeah. This one will start slowing down, I think, midwinter, and then the next succession and the other high tunnels will really start picking up.
This bed just had the tomatoes taken out this morning, and it's been forked along the edge because when we walk along it, it compacts it, so it's been forked. We put a bale of peat per bed, and it's been fertilized, so I'll come back with the wheel hoe and knock the clods down, and then rake it ready, and it'll be ready to transplant lettuce in this afternoon. So this bed is getting ready to plant lettuce in the next succession, and it had tomatoes in it. I got them out this morning. I have it forked. This is what we do when we fork. I just pull and crack. We don't do any tilling. We're a no-till farm, so this is my bed prep. It has a bale of peat, and then it has the fertilizer. I'll come back with the wheel hoe, knock the clods down, and rake it to where it'll be ready for planting the next succession of lettuce.
So here's another example of succession planting of our lettuces. This lettuce was seeded on 8/26, and we'll start harvesting this in early to mid-November. But then right behind it, we have another succession that was seeded on September the 2nd. And this one, we won't start harvesting until the beginning of December. So this is just to make sure that we're going to have lettuce throughout the whole winter season. And then our next succession of lettuce is going to go in this empty bed over here. And then as this lettuce comes out, we'll have more lettuce coming in behind it, just to make sure that we always have lettuce.
So I believe Saturday night we're going to get another frost. So I've finished picking all of these tomatoes, whether they were red or green. We'll sell them for the next couple of weeks probably. So I'll pull these. They'll be out of here by next week, and I'll get this bed ready like I got that bed ready. Fork it, bale of peat, fertilizer, get it wheel hoed, raked, and ready to plant. I have a day's worth of work to pull these out, I guess. So with the freeze coming this weekend, I've picked all of the tomatoes, and they'll all be coming out because they'll be dead this weekend. And I will transition this bed into a lettuce bed. I'll work it like I worked the last bed, with a fork in it, a bale of peat, the fertilizer, wheel hoe, and rake. Get it ready to transplant the lettuce, next succession of lettuce in. I think we're going to need both of these beds for the next succession, actually. Yeah. So it's going to be a big planting, and that'll carry us into February.
And the reason that that's going to be a big planting is because here on November the 20th, the day length falls below 10 hours per day. So the plants really just sit there. They don't grow, and so we want to have these big plantings in here that we're going to be continuously harvesting from until January the 20th, and then really February, when things really start growing crazy again.
This high tunnel is a 30 by 96 with W trusses for hanging trellising tomatoes, and it also has the ridge vent, which a lot of them don't have. And I really like it. It was a lot of work, almost twice as much work it seemed like as a regular high tunnel, but it's definitely worth it. I imagine I'm 15 degrees cooler in the summertime with the 30% shade cloth and that ridge vent open than the high tunnel right next door that doesn't have the ridge vent. So I would I would say it's definitely worth it. I don't have a problem with any flower drop or anything like that on the tomatoes when it's really hot even. And in the wintertime, it's pretty much left open all the time, which takes the humidity out and allows the lettuce to perform a little bit better. I don't have nearly the diseases on the lettuce with that open all the time. I would have done it a little different. Hindsight, the next one I will do a little bit different. They really didn't say how high you should move the things on your trusses to get it, so I'm a little bit flatter than it should be. And I didn't stretch the plastic tight enough apparently when I put it on, and then it rained like crazy. And I come out and I had 18 great big 500-gallon fish bowls up there. So I ended up running rope just because I didn't have it quite at the right angle. So the next one I do, it will be right. But I haven't had a problem with it since, so it's been okay.
We're currently harvesting this bed of lettuce. You can see that they're just big and pretty and ready to go. The last harvest of this will be next week, and then again we're going to transplant right back into it. We will do successions of greens, turnips, radishes, and more head lettuce. As you can see in this other bed, those will be harvested out in the next couple of weeks, and we'll put greens right back in.
It's the end of October, and we're back at Oakwoods Farms in Grand Mee, Missouri with Karen and Doug Scott. We're going to talk about what's next on the farm for winter production. So, what's coming up at the end of October?
We've had a couple of frosts, so our big garden outside is done. We're done with peppers, that sort of thing. We do have some hardy brassicas that are still in the field, but we're transitioning the high tunnels to winter produce. We still have tomatoes. We'll be harvesting the last of those this week and pulling the last of the tomatoes out, and then transplanting back in the lettuces and kale, radishes, greens, so on and so forth. And then we have a little bit of ginger and turmeric that we still need to get out of the field yet.
Working on that this week. It'll be out by Saturday night. I think I have to have it out, looks like.
So how do you decide when you have to have the ginger and turmeric out of the field?
Well, usually we grow it in the high tunnel, but this year we didn't have the space, so we put it in the garden, and so before it freezes, it needs to be out.
We've got a thermometer out but we don't want the soil temperature to drop below 50 degrees, so we're watching that very closely.
So we watch the soil temperature at 50 degrees. Okay. So when you do these transplants, do you start these plants from seed yourselves, or do you purchase transplants?
We start them from seed.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. Takes a lot of planning, I would presume.
Yes.
Okay,
Lots
so
of
tell us
planning.
about your planning.
So we've done several years of record keeping, and so we've determined what the days to maturity are with the shortening of days,
I
of
see.
day length. And so like we have some plantings out there that are still in the high tunnels. Their days to maturity was 70. The next plantings that we're putting in, the days to maturity are going to be 107. So over the season, it's gone from 56 days to 107 days. So we have to make sure that we have, based on our sales, enough lettuce that's just sitting there waiting to harvest to cover us over that length of time. So, and depending on the bed space that we have as well. So if you look at this last seeding that we did, I know that it's going to be 97 days to maturity, so I know that this lettuce is going to last my sales from 12/28 to February the 11th. and I need to determine what that quantity needs to be.
And so how do you determine that quantity? That's based on your sales?
It's based on sales. I know that.
And also, at the 10-hour day cutoff, that's when things really just sit there. So it'll take 100 days for things to mature. So they have to be, 3/4 of the way mature before that time sets in, and then they just sit there and don't do anything almost all winter long. So we have to make sure that we have, we'll plant 1,600 plants a week that'll, like 1,600 plants this week, 1,600 plants next week, 1,600 plants the next week, but that'll carry us clear into springtime, where usually we plant 500 a week.
So your crop growth basically stops when the days get shorter than 10 hours of daylight.
Yes.
But there are still activities to do on the farm, I would presume, at those times. So we're still watching out for pests and other issues. So what's happening in that particular time?
There's always weeds.
Weeds.
Oh,
Weeds.
the winter
This part
weeds.
of the country, there's 4-season weeds. So you don't just get a spring weed or a fall weed, you get winter weeds too. And there's pests, mostly aphids in the wintertime. The caterpillars are gone.
So let's talk a minute about pest control on an all-natural farm. Let's talk about what you're doing now at the end of October going into winter when pests are still a problem in high tunnels. So tell us about your pest control methods.
We use organic methods, no chemicals. And I'm a terrible sprayer. I'm sure we lose a lot of produce because I'm a terrible sprayer. But I've been experimenting with essential oils, and it does a fairly good job. It'll go until it's time that you have to come back in with a pyganic, and that's what I use as a pesticide for aphids in the wintertime. But I've cut my pyganic use probably a third by being able to come in with the essential oils. And I don't know if it's that or if it's the no-till that we've done and the organic, but we had a lot of
beneficials.
The parasitic wasps I hardly sprayed at all, honestly, last winter. I had parasitic wasps. If you looked at a or at a lettuce plant that had aphids on it, you'd see 2 live aphids and 40 parasitic wasp aphids. So I don't know. It seems like the essential oils it doesn't seem to bother the beneficials as much as even the organic pesticide.
And we also don't pour on a lot of fertilizer this time of year. We still fertilize our beds because we're coming out of tomatoes and those really hungry crops, but we don't want that, lush growth that really attracts bugs.
We do a lot of compost. I use my hay ring mess after cattle feed and stuff, and I compost that for a year before we put it on the beds. And I do a couple, 3 inches a year per bed, and we also put in to offset the pH on that, we'll put down a bale of peat. So we're doing that per bed. So our organic matter, I know in our one high tunnel is like 12% organic
Pretty high.
matter.
That's good, yeah. So you use soil health as a means of keeping your plants healthy.
Yes.
You use beneficial insects in terms of letting nature bring them in. By not using toxic chemicals, you use essential oils, and you use organic approved chemicals like pyganic.
Yes.
Anything else we're missing in terms of pest control? Do you use certain varieties or not use certain crops because of the pests you might have with them?
In the summertime, we don't grow greens because it's impossible to control flea beetles. So there are some crops that we stay away from at certain times of the year.
We have been also, like cucumbers, we'll use the need,
Parthenocarpic.
they don't need to be pollinated. So I don't know, it doesn't seem to draw the bugs in, the cucumber beetles.
Very good, yeah. This time of year, at the end of October, succession planting is very important. So tell us about your strategy for succession plantings.
Well, with the days shortening, plant growth slows, and so we have to make sure that we are planting a large enough quantity to cover our winter sales. So our plantings get larger, and we're actually planting less frequently. We're seeding less frequently, but we still have, we're still successioning. So as the summer crops come out, we're putting in more crops. An example of that is the last lettuce crop that we seeded. We did 1,600. The days to maturity are going to be 97. So I need enough lettuce to cover from 12/28 to February the 11th. And so that, based on my sales, that's how many I need to plant. And I know that as the days get longer, my days to maturity, as the days get shorter, my days to maturity get longer. And so as we move through the season, I'm watching that days to maturity, and I'm matching that to my last planting. It sounds, it's really is a jigsaw puzzle. And then based on what our bed availability is, when I know that I'm going to have beds opening up, and I know that I have plantings right behind it to transplant in to fill that space. So this is an example of a crop that you can take past frost into November. This broccoli was seeded in July and then transplanted out mid-August. And then it'll be ready to harvest within the next couple of weeks. Last night it was 31 degrees. We've had several hard frosts now, and it looks just beautiful. Again, it's a little slow growing because the days are getting longer, but it'll be ready in the next couple of weeks. And I think we'll have several weeks of harvest.
Well, we're in one of the tunnels here at Oakwoods Farm, and this is an excellent example of succession plantings and what it takes to have crop in a harvestable and sellable form throughout the winter. Karen and Doug, tell us what's going on in here.
So we have several successions of lettuce here. This particular bed is going to be ready to harvest next week, this week or next week actually. It was seeded in August and then transplanted 4 weeks later. We determine the size of each planting to cover our sales for a specific period of time. So we know how long that this lettuce is going to last. This next succession here, well, let me take you to this succession right here that the gentlemen down here are planting right now. That is not going to be harvested until February. So the days to maturity there are close to 100 or so, where this one was growing much faster. This one will be ready in December, and then so on and so forth. We also have several successions of spinach growing over here as well as kale. The spinach will take us throughout the winter. It'll probably start bolting in April, May, and we'll pull that out and put another crop in. This is probably the tail end of this kale here, and we have another succession of kale to take us through the rest of the winter in another high tunnel.
Occasionally we have disease and insect issues that can show up in tunnels in winter production. And we have an example here with this lettuce crop. This is a disease called lettuce drop, and lettuce drop is caused by a fungus. The fungus is Sclerotina sclerotorium. This particular fungus is very interesting. In its active form, of course, it causes the collapse and death of the lettuce plants, but it also has a resting stage. It's a spore stage that can persist in the soil for long periods of time. It's also an interesting disease because it has a broad host range, not just lettuce, but a number of other vegetables. Now, when it comes to managing lettuce drop, The first step is rotation, and if possible, a long rotation into a crop that is not susceptible to this disease. Now, unfortunately, as I said before, there are lots of hosts that Sclerotinia can attack, so that can sometimes be a bit of a challenge. It's also possible to turn the soil and bury those resting stages so that they're not present when the crop plants are planted into that bed. There are biological pesticides. An example is Contans, which can give relief from the disease as well. But Contans it's a hyperparasite. It attacks that resting stage that's of the disease, and Contans has to be applied at just the right time. The environmental conditions have to be favorable to see the benefit of that particular control.
Hello everybody, I'm going to be talking about lettuce drop, which is caused by two fungal species, Sclerotinia sclerosiorum and Sclerotinia minor. These two fungi also cause diseases on tomato, coriander, celery, cucumber, melon, squash, legume, and pepper. My name is Jaimin Patel. I am an assistant professor of plant pathology at Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri. During this talk, I will be providing information about lettuce drop symptoms, how this disease spreads, and what can you do to protect the lettuce from Sclerotinia species. Lettuce drop disease symptoms can be identified by looking for wilting symptoms on outermost layer of the leaves, which will indicate infection to the ground. Once pathogen has infected the plant, the ground will have brown lesion or spots, which will turn into soft tissues or watery decay, followed by snowy white fungal growth, which will cause the entire plant to wilt or drop, and this disease symptoms is referred to as lettuce drop. You can see the photograph on the right uppermost corner, which indicates lettuce drop symptoms. As disease advances, you can see in the second photograph on your right side, the sclerotia will produce, which is black in color, and eventually there are actually more sclerotia will produce either on leaves or crown area. And there is a photograph on bottom right corner along with the ruler, so you can imagine how big or small this sclerotia could be. The sclerotia of Sclerotinia minor and Sclerotinia sclerosiorum infects the lettuce crop in different manner. Most of the time, sclerotia of Sclerotinia minor infects the crop directly, whereas sclerotia of Sclerotinia sclerosiorum produces mushroom-like structure called apothecium, as it can be seen on the photograph. This mushroom-like structure or apothecia produces lots of ascospores, which can be dispersed by wind currents, and these spores land on the plant surfaces, which will eventually cause a new infection. Now let's talk about management of lettuce drop. Before you plant lettuce, always think about how can you avoid lettuce drop, because this disease is difficult to manage. First thing, you avoid the wet soil and keep the bed or soil surface dry. Also plant lettuce on raised bed, which can help reducing the wet soil. You can also think about any strategies that can reduce the leaf wetness period as well as leaf wetness in your farming system, because more leaf wetness period will provide pathogen a chance to infect the leaf tissue. You can also scout for diseases in your farming system, which will allow you to identify initiation of any new infection, collect those infected plant at early stage, put them in a bag, and you can destroy it. So other healthy plants have a chance to thrive, and you can harvest healthy lettuce. You should also consider a variety that avoids the leaves touching the ground, because several times pathogen is on the soil surfaces and they can invade the leaf tissue through the ground. There are also a few fungicides available for control of lettuce drop. These fungicides should be applied before you see any infection to be effective and to be able to manage the lettuce drop. Make sure you read the fungicide label every time before you apply these fungicides on your lettuce crop. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact me at my email patelj@lincolnu.edu. This email address can be also seen on your screen. Thank you very much for listening.
In this high tunnel, this open bed here was what we harvested lettuce last week. We'll put in a bale of peat and get it ready to put in probably greens. We'll probably rotate this bed over to there. This middle bed has been planted today. It was mustard greens, 3 different kinds, some arugula, turnips, radishes, and cilantro, which is what we have in this bed here, and this will be harvested out this week. I should have harvested the greens last week. Well, when we harvested them last week, I was supposed to pull them out, but I didn't have time, so we have another harvest on them this week, which is a good thing. There's radishes, turnips. We overplanted the turnips. We tried a new method of planting, and it was way too much, so we've been selling turnip greens and baby turnips because they don't do anything. They're too close together. And we'll have head lettuce and more romaine. We probably won't do another succession of romaine after this next one, because when it gets too cold, the veins burst and it's just an ugly thing. So this will probably be our last planting of romaine until spring. And on the far side over here we have beets that we transplanted in last week. They should be ready in about 5 weeks, I'm hoping. So that's what we got going on in here.
I'm Patrick Byers, Horticulture Field Specialist at the University of Missouri Extension, and I'm so excited to be at the Webb City Farmers Market. It's mid-December, and we're here with Market Manager Rachel Lynch. Rachel, tell us a bit about the market today.
Well, the winter market's just a little bit different than summer times. We have about 20 vendors and we have walls, so that makes it a little bit less of a trying place to shop for most customers. So we have everything from your fresh broccoli and different types of produce. Your greens are coming in real nicely this time of year. And then we also incorporate holiday crafts, of course, because it is the holidays. So fresh baked breads, jelly and jams, it's all here still all year round, but it just feels a little bit different because we're closed. We're a little closed in.
Well, we're here at Oakwood's booth at the Webb City Farmers Market, and Karen Scott is going to share with us basically what happens on a market day during the winter market.
Oh, well, it actually starts on Thursday and Friday. We're harvesting, we're washing, we're packing, and then we're up bright and early on Saturday morning. We're about 30 minutes south of the farmers market. So we get here at about 8 o'clock and start setting up our tables and our signs and our pricing.
Karen, can you share with us what you have today at market?
Yes, I have this lettuce mix. We sell a lot of this lettuce mix. It's 8 different types of lettuce in it. This is what we call our market mix, and it's very popular as well. It has the same lettuce, but it also has mustard, mizuna, and arugula in it, and so it's a lettuce mix with a pop. And then we have baby kale. We have some sage. a few broccoli, a few baby turnips, microgreens, and then we have wheatgrass here.
Well, it looks like an excellent display. Market will be opening in a few minutes, so thank you, Karen.
Yes, you're welcome.
Well, Robert, it's a great day to be at the farmers market.
It is, Patrick, and we're here at the Webb City Farmers Market today.
It's the middle part of December, it's market day, and market is just about ready to open. And there's the opening bell. All right. So we're going to do a quick walkthrough and just get an idea of what we have at the winter market today here at Webb City Farmers Market. Well, Robert, this is a fantastic market. Tell me more about it.
Patrick, this market is open every Saturday of the year. It's a market where people know to come here. It's marketed very well because it's a market. They market on Facebook, they market on web pages, so people know what they have here. There's actually crops listed on their Facebook page and on their website of what's going to be available at the market today. And today being a Saturday in December, we have quite an interesting array of food available from our produce growers. Patrick, here we are at one of our vendor booths at the Webb City Farmers Market.
Yes, this is an excellent example of what farmers can produce for sale at a winter market. And if we look down this row of veggies, we see some vegetables like the sweet potatoes and the butternut squash that were harvested at the end of the season are being held in storage.
Yes.
And then we also see carrots, we see onions too, which were dug some time ago and were held under storage and then brought out for the winter market. And then if we look down the rest of the display, we see some greenhouse grown crops. We see some hydroponic lettuce. We also see some tomatoes and other crops that are suitable for winter markets. So again, an excellent example of what's available for farmers to produce and sell during the winter.
Exactly. We have produce that's from storage, we have produce that's currently grown in greenhouses, and we have field-grown produce that's freshly harvested, such as the carrots.
Exactly. Those are all opportunities for farmers here in Missouri from the standpoint of winter production.
Very good. Patrick, some of the ways markets attract more people is to have things besides fresh produce.
It's true, and Webb City Farmers Market is an excellent example of, as we look around at the vendors here at the winter market, yes, we have farmers that are selling produce, but we also have craftspeople who have brought in some of their creative wares. We have bakers that have baked goods. We have coffee and tea vendors. We have people selling meats and other products. Again, all possibilities for sale at the winter market.
The more variety, the better.
The more variety, the better. Robert, the Webb City Farmers Market hasn't always been a winter market.
That's true, Patrick. It used to just be a traditional summer market, but the growers realized that there's a potential to have profit with winter sales of produce. So this is a farmers market that's very farmer driven. So the farmers were able to work with the board and the Parks Department here in Webb City to create a market that's open year round.
And we can see some of the adaptations to the summer market that were made. The drop-down curtains, for example, and the lighting that made this a very warm, welcoming place even for a winter market.
That's true, and even when it's snowing and raining, the vendors are dry, the produce is clean. In the summertime, the electricity that they have for the lighting is used for fans, which is great for keeping the public coming to the market even in the heat of the summer.
And I think it should be pointed out that the management of this market has been very, very visionary in establishing that winter market. This is one of the first winter markets in Missouri.
That's true. This market has the opportunities here in this area, Webb City, Joplin area, to draw a number of people in the wintertime as well. But on top of that, they have a great reputation for having quality produce, quality vendors, and consistency in what they provide.
And for more information on the Webb City Farmers Market, check out their website and also check out their Facebook page.
They do have a Facebook page, yes.
All right, that was quite a information-dense video, wouldn't you say? And so we're going to open it up for questions now in the chat. Would you please type your questions into the chat? And if you have any questions for Karen and Doug, and we would certainly love them to be able to answer your questions now. So one of the questions that came in was about irrigation in the winter time. But there are a few other questions as well beyond that. So please feel free to type into the chat. I want to remind you that that video will be made available in the future on a YouTube link through Web City Farmers Market, part of the visionary leadership of Eileen Nichols and Rachel Lynch, who were both who's featured in the video you just saw. So Karen is there in the chat. And how do you irrigate in the winter? And she says, we use drip irrigation, same as summer. But I've got to tell you, so the question is, how do you avoid freezing, right? So if Karen can put a little bit in there about how they avoid freezing or talk to us about it, that would be, I think, beneficial for the group.
Okay, well, I'll start and then Doug will chime in, I'm sure. We do not water a lot in the wintertime because the temperatures are much, much cooler at night. The tunnels and the plants are not really actively growing. They don't consume a lot of water, so we barely water. Now, this morning it was minus 18 degrees here at the farm, and when I went out into the high tunnels around noon, it was 60 degrees. So we really don't have any issues with freezing, and we're really just running our drip lines off of a header pipe that is situated at the head of our high tunnels.
You just unhook the hose when you're done and it drains out pretty much. I've never really had any problem. Maybe the hose running from the header to the hydrant will freeze, but just stretch it out in the sunshine and it's clear in no time. And so I might water maybe once a week for a couple hours in each high tunnel, is all winter long.
It really depends on how much sunshine we get and how much the high tunnels heat up. And then our hydrant, we have several hydrants that run several different tunnels. They're situated outside of the tunnel, but they're all frost-free.
Okay, next question, of course, and we knew this was going to come up with this severe cold snap we've been having. And the question is, what modifications do you make to the high tunnels as temps consistently dip below freezing? Now, you're located in Granby, which is in the southwest corner of the state. And your farm is kind of situated in a slightly rolling hills area there. So it's maybe folks who are up in the northern part of the state on flat ground that's very, very windy in the wintertime may have a little more extreme cold than we do in the south part of the state. But what modifications do you make when the high tunnels, as temps consistently dip below freezing?
Usually I run hoops and row cover, but I usually haven't covered anything unless it's below 20. It doesn't seem, lettuce, kale, turnips and stuff, if it's 20 degrees or higher, I don't cover anything. Now, when it's 18 degrees below zero, I don't know what you can do. I guess we'll see how everything fared. I cover with a 30 weight row cover. I find that to be usually adequate for most everything. And like I say, if it's above 20, I don't cover anything. I close the high tunnels at night and open them in the morning, and that's basically what I do.
In fact, we have one high tunnel that is vented all year long. So we close up the sides, but the top of that tunnel is open, and we find that there's less moisture buildup in that tunnel. So what happens is when you get a lot of moisture, you get a lot of disease problems. Also, we've discovered that drips down onto the lettuce and then freezes on the lettuce and ruins it. It kills that portion and just ruins it. So really important to keep them vented for sure.
Okay, and just one more question as far as the heat goes. Do you heat your tunnels? And if you do not, do you wish you did? Or what's your story about heating your tunnels?
No, we don't heat them at all. The crops that we grow are very winter hardy. There hasn't been a need to. We are thinking about transitioning our very first little high tunnel into a greenhouse, just so we can have more seedling production, and then that will be heated. But growing winter crops, we don't find that it's necessary to have any additional heat.
Okay, thank you for that. There's a question here, and I'll read the question, but I'm going to broaden it just a little bit. It says, when you say you make $700 over 2 markets, is that 2 days at the same market, or do you go to more than one winter market? And I'd like to broaden that question just a little bit. And at what point do you feel as though it's worth your time to go to a market? In other words, how did you choose to go to a second market rather than just one? Was it the amount of crops available? Was, you know, how do you make those decisions on how many markets to go to?
Well, Doug and I are really, we really advocate for local grown, organic food being available to as many people as possible. And so when and Webb City Farmers Market is where we started, and actually where we sell the most produce. But we wanted to be involved in trying to establish a new farmers market in a more, well, it's in downtown Joplin. So just a more food desert area. And so that was a lot of our decision to go to that market. And it's growing, it's definitely growing.
And
But-
we had extra produce, you know, when things really get cranking, you know, we have enough to sell at 2 markets. You know, the winter markets are slower by a third, probably, at least, compared to the mid-high summer markets. So, you know, we have enough produce to hit 2, and we'll see how we go, and might even be adding another one this year.
Yeah, we're trying to plant our crops so that we can get into Neosho as well, Scott.
Very good. Okay, so now we saw in the video where Doug had talked about his collection of rainwater on the roof of the high tunnel. Okay, and there was a question about how can that be avoided, because other people get that as well. But then there's another question that came through is, do you get a lot of snowfall there, and how do you handle snow that also might accumulate on the high tunnel?
I really haven't had a problem with snow. It slides off pretty good, even when, you know, we've had pretty good amounts. Like, we probably have a foot of snow out there right now, and I don't think there's any on the tunnels. By the time the days warm up that first day, it slides off pretty well. And on that my fish bowls, you know, all I did was stretch it just another inch end to end, and I haven't had a problem with that since. So, you know, if it wouldn't have rained as hard as, I mean, it rained. It was probably like 5 inches in 2 hours or something. You know, it just rolled down just enough to hit that one purlin and stop that water, and it let it start building up. And as it stretched it and stretched it and stretched it, so when it after I got it all siphoned out, I've really actually only stretched it maybe another inch end to end, and I haven't had that problem again. So
Okay.
I did probably ruin my plastic for a couple of years worth of life, but you know.
But it was a learning.
Yeah.
We'll be installing another high tunnel this summer, actually, and it's going to have a ridge vent too, so we'll know what we need to do differently.
Okay, another question. This is about propagation, because you start from seeds and then you transplant out. So can you describe your seed starting operations? And they're interested in the layout, the space needed, and the methods used.
Wow. Right now, we're starting everything indoors. Like I had mentioned previously, we are transitioning our very first tunnel this year into a proper greenhouse, so we can have, is it 1,200 square feet?
Yeah,
I
pretty
think it's
much.
1,200 square feet of growing or seed starting space that's heated. But yeah, currently, I don't know if you can see behind Doug, but there's actually 5 shelves of plants there that are ready to go out. We do use our high tunnels a lot. We harden off the seedlings very carefully by gradually reducing them to cooler temperatures, and then we'll store them in the high tunnel until they're ready to go in the ground.
Okay. What about tomato? When do you transplant your tomatoes into the tunnel? Would that be the official end of your winter crop production then, when the tomatoes go in? Is that how you would define or put your winter
No,
crop in?
so we want our tomatoes to go in at the end of March. So that is it's about 30 days before our last frost date. So our high tunnels give us that much of a head start. So we'll have about 6-week-old transplants going in at the end of March. And there's still lettuce in the high tunnels. And so we're harvesting out the center of the beds, and then we're transplanting tomatoes, cucumbers, and whatever that we can.
So we're still harvesting lettuce on the sides while we have tomatoes growing down the center, you know, just to keep more than one crop growing. Utilize the space we have as much as we can.
Yes. And that's the $1 per square foot for the high tunnels that we're all interested in. So they also want to know if you also do squash, melons, and cucumbers in the summertime. And I think that you do use the typical summer crops too, or is there some type of, do you modify your summer production to assist you with the winter production in ways other than just scheduling and timing? And Doug had mentioned earlier about using varieties in the summer that are maybe more disease resistant or insect resistant, because you can't really do much with insect control. And while you think about that answer, I just want to point out that next week we will have a special video on aphid control from Dr. Trinkline, University of Missouri, and he will talk about various methods of aphid control as far as pest control goes. But in the meantime, what about those other summer crops? Do you do special things in the summer to assist you with the winter production?
We don't grow a lot of melons because we have a horrible cucumber beetle problem and we're
Squash bugs. I mean, it's organically it's tough to.
It's tough. It really is tough.
So we do a lot of succession of squashes and things like that, because I mean they, you know, you might get 2-3 weeks out of them before they get bad, or maybe you get 6 weeks out of them. You know, you just never quite know. So you always got to have them going. We do ginger and turmeric. They're pretty self-sufficient. They aren't really too buggy. Nothing really bothers them too bad. So you know, you just kind of keep the weeds off, and they do really well. We do lots of peppers. You know, we'll do them in the new high tunnel this year, hopefully. They do better. Peppers do better, like tomatoes do better under cover. You know, okra, things like that grow outside real well. Broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, things like that. Don't really grow them in the high tunnels because they grow just as well outside, and it seems like they, you know, some things don't grow good next to each other, and you know. Sometimes you don't pay attention and they don't grow good next to each other.
So there's a question specifically about, they said they see your broccoli is outside, and but do you keep all brassicas outside besides the turnips?
No, there's kale and, well, yeah, Swiss chard is not a brassica.
Okay.
Kale and mustards actually are what we grow, brassicas that we grow in the high tunnels.
And they,
I see.
like, disease,
Okay.
better disease control and stuff with that inside.
Yes. And so how many high tunnels do you have total?
3 right now.
Okay. You say right now, are you planning to expand?
Yes, we have
Or
another one
or
that we're
retract?
waiting
Yeah.
to get going. Oh, hopefully we'll have it up midsummer. It's
Okay.
I guess there's a big problem with steel or something right now, so you can't get things going. So we've been having, it's been on order for several weeks, and I guess we can't get it for a while yet. So
And one of the last questions here, unless people add more questions, is the number of workers you have. We saw a couple people transplanting lettuce in the video. Which can you tell us about them? And do you have other workers there?
We have some organizations that have adopted us, and we have wonderful young people that as they transition through, it seems like about once every 6 weeks we'll get a new set of volunteers, which is wonderful. Last year was really the first year that we actually had hired a person. And this year there's plans to expand that. We just have to.
we're just 2 old people.
We're just 2 old people. Although our son Stephen, he helps a lot. He does a lot of marketing, and he's really, really good at that. And he actually runs our microgreens, so that's in his hands. Our bottlenecks are seeding, transplanting, and harvesting. So that's where we're going to focus, trying to get some help this year. And then we do have help at the market, at Webb City Farmers Market. I have a really nice young lady that loves the market, and that's what she does. She just comes and helps me with customers at the market there. So otherwise,
Okay.
it's just me and Doug.
That seems like a lot of work for just 2 people.
Yeah, but it's good.
Yeah. Okay, so one last question here. How far are your markets from you? And I'm going to expand on that one. Is at what point would a market be too far? How do you determine how far you want to go to market? Because you had talked about food deserts, and you want to make a statement or a presence in areas where there's food deserts and people may not have access to the fresh food. Now, people who are in low incomes don't necessarily think about putting fresh food, fresh produce in their diet simply because it's not available for them to purchase a lot of times. So I know Webb City Farmers Market has the SNAP program there where they can come in and use those stamps and things there. But for your, is that one of the cats?
Yes, that was a cat.
Okay, I hope so. And so they have that, but how would you determine which markets might be too far or out of range for you?
You factor in the cost of fuel, the time that it takes to drive there and back. Do I have to hire somebody? Do I have to send to that market versus what am I going to sell? What's going to be the return on that? Those are the factors that I would consider. I don't really have a set dollar amount that we have to make because it depends on where we're going. But I definitely take those things into consideration. Equipment, do I have to have tents because it's outdoors? What are the fees at the market? Some markets are quite a bit more expensive than where we're at now. So versus do I want to cultivate a customer following at that market? Does that make any sense?
You don't
Yes,
want
so
to
you,
drive too far.
you don't want to drive too far. Yeah, you don't want to drive too far, but you want to be in a place where it's worthwhile for you to cultivate not just, you're also cultivating a following, a audience, a group of customers for your market, which is very important. And that's one of the things we mentioned, I think, in the video, was about how the growers themselves are representative of the quality of their farms there. And people look for that consistency and quality in the food they're going to eat. Okay, so.
But I'll answer the question. We're 30 minutes away from each market. So it's really not that far at all.
Okay, just enough to get the engine warmed up and the heat trim on.
Yeah.
Very good. All right. One last question then about how did you get volunteers started? You know, because and I'm gonna say I've worked with volunteers before, and there seems to be a learning curve, a bit of a training going on. So how do you get volunteers started in learning those things?
Which is another reason why we want to hire someone that will hopefully have an interest in what it is that we're doing and want to stick around for a while, because yeah, it's an investment to train people. Do you want to talk about how we get started with volunteers?
We just work with them. You have to be side by side with them. And even when you're side by side with them, you know, sometimes it's I don't know, an experience, let's say.
Yeah.
But no, we work with them. We kind of plan out what we're going to do when they get here. You know, we don't really have a set. You know, some people are good at you know, dealing with strawberries, and some people are good with weeding, and some people aren't. So
Yeah.
you just kind of got to look and see what their strengths are too. Some people like to seed, and some people don't like to weed. So you know,
Yeah.
you know, with the volunteers, you know, we just appreciate the help. So whatever we can get out of them, we're happy to have them work beside us. So
and it's word of mouth, so they really just find us and ask if we have volunteer opportunities on the farm. We have never solicited volunteers, not at all. So they just somehow find us.
So are you partnering with a particular agency, or is it just reputation, word of mouth kind of thing?
It's just reputation, word of mouth kind of thing.
Okay.
If the
Very good.
volunteers that worked here previously liked the work to work here, then they let the next volunteers that are coming through know, and then they come to the farm.
Very good. Very good. If only we could get good employees to do the same, right? All right. So there's a question about, we mentioned about adding another high tunnel. So how do you decide then when you need a new high tunnel, another high tunnel to go in? That question has been asked.
well,
Do you,
I know that compared to outside to under the cover of a high tunnel, easily you double your
Yield.
yield, which doubles your money. So if you can grow under tunnel compared to outside, you know, you got half as much work for the same amount of money, type of thing. So a lot of it though too is, you know, you apply for a grant. If you get a grant, well, you're going to put a high tunnel up. So you know, that was kind of how we got started in the first place, was a grant for our first high tunnel.
And right now, they're just packed. The high tunnels are just packed. So I would like to start doing a little bit more with cover cropping to just keep continuing to build our soil. And so we need more growing space under cover, so that we have the time to be able to grow cover crops and incorporate them into the soil. So it's in a almost like taking a high tunnel out of production, so you can work on the soil. So that's another reason we need more space.
okay, so more space so you can incorporate cover crops. and give a resting period essentially to the cropping part and do soil building, and also to bring crops from outside the field inside, where you can get a better quality and a more focused production there.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yes.
Okay. I want to point out a couple things here, see if there's any more questions in the chat. But there will be a YouTube version of this video coming out on the Webb City Farmers Market. And we understand the video was choppy for quite a few people, and that's a glitch we had with Zoom, and we can't quite get that to go smoothly. But the video itself is very smooth and goes pretty nicely, and you'll be able to see those images and things there. It's not really just like a bunch of photos is what some people have said, because it's coming through that way, and we apologize for that. But the video will come out in actual nice and smooth video. The second thing I want to point out is we do have a survey, like a questionnaire. How did you like this session again? And the link to that is in the chat. It's anonymous. So go ahead and fill that out if you would before you leave tonight. And I'm waiting for questions here, and I don't see any other questions. What is the most effective application method for essential oils? And I think that's probably going to be one of our last questions. So please, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate, just put them in the chat. But we're talking about essential oils. And there was a question, is there, you mentioned adding it to water and spraying and essential oils. And how did you decide which ones to use when?
Well, we just kind of started with different types, cedarwood, orange, peppermint, just to see how things worked. And it come out that the orange was the most effective for killing. It works on caterpillars, it works on aphids pretty well. And the peppermint's more of a deterrent. We started out with a fogger, but it blew the dirt so much onto the lettuce that I stopped using it, and I just went ahead and went with a high pressure sprayer, backpack sprayer. And it's 20 drops of orange per gallon and 10 drops of peppermint per gallon, and I use them together. And I'm still working with that peppermint. It seems to help with the
Repelling.
well, no, the mold and mildew on the plants a little bit
Powdery
also.
mildew. We're actually finding that might be having an effect on powdery mildew.
It seems to stop it a little bit, the peppermint and the orange. I don't know if it's the orange or the peppermint, but the orange, I tried to use with just a chemical and stuff, but it seemed like the peppermint and the orange together is doing a little bit on the powdery mildew. So we're just kind of seeing how that works also. And I'm down to a backpack sprayer that is under pressure a little bit.
And David Middleton, who is on, can speak more to this project. He's actually running this project, and there are several farms that are looking into and experimenting with essential oils.
Yes, David, is there something you'd like to add about this special project with essential oils?
We've just completed our first year, and we're learning a lot. A lot of it was figuring out how many drops per gallon we needed to do something, and working on what combinations work together. I want to be sure and let everyone know that what we use is 100% pure therapeutic grade oils. You can't get any control with junk and the fragrances. You've got to go with the really good stuff. And that's the reason we're only using a few drops in a gallon. And when we go back and figure, these bottles cost anywhere between $15 and $20 a bottle, and there's 300 drops in a bottle. So when you figure that you're using 20 drops, you're getting 15 or more sprays out of that one bottle for $1 a spray. So it's pretty economical when you look at comparing to Pyganic or some of the other insecticides that are out there. So it's very cost effective. we know it's not going to be a perfect cure, but the main thing is if we can break that cycle of continually spraying for maybe 1 or 2 cycles, it's going to give us better insect control. We don't have to worry about post-harvest interval when we come back in after spraying, because these oils, people use them on their skins, they take them internally, they put them on their pets. And so they're 100% safe. They don't change the taste of the food in any way. And so if you want more information on them, I'd be glad to talk to you. I put all my contact information in the chat tonight. My email is middletond@lincolnu.edu, and my phone number is 417-466-8056. Would welcome any questions, personal, that you want to talk about, and anything I can do to help you, I would more than happy to do it.
All right, thank you, David. That's a very interesting project, to say the least. I'm using essential oils for insect repellents and controls. We did see a video last week about the citrus oil on the cutworm, and it was very effective. We found that quite interesting, so thank you for that. In the chat, I see no other questions, and it's 8 o'clock, so I'd like to thank Karen and Doug Scott, Oakwoods Farms, for opening up their farm to us for this session. Also like to thank Eileen Nichols and Rachel Lynch of Webb City Farmers Market for sponsoring the grant from Missouri Department of Agriculture, and our co-conspirators, you might say, of Sean Bishop and David Middleton at Lincoln University, and of course, Patrick Byers and Kelly McGowan of University of Missouri. I would like to mention also then that next week, that there will be a special discussion, a video actually, with Dr. Trinkline from the University of Missouri about aphid control and organic and traditional methods. We'll send out, if you're registered, you'll get the link for next week's videos, next week's session, and we'll show that then, along with Millsap Farms. Curtis Millsap will be our farm next week, and Kelly McGowan will be hosting that for us there.